Okay. Um, so we have everybody kind of moving over from the holding area. And I usually want to say hello, everybody in the chat, and be sure you can hear us. Can we all hear? um, and then it just takes a minute. So everyone, the participants are starting to come in
I
on
wonder,
this rainy evening.
yeah,
So
caught in the rain on your way home?
yeah, it's like really kind of cold and wet, and to be honest, kind of nasty out there. So I hope everybody's, I'm assuming, inside and warm and dry.
It
So
is.
we
I
were just
actually heard them say the S word, snow, on the radio, and uh,
That's all you need to say. You can't say it out loud. You don't want to jinx it. Are the traditions, do they hold the same about the ice cubes in the toilet and like pajamas on backwards? That was when I taught elementary school. It was just the kids couldn't even hint at a snow day. It was like a no hitter in baseball. You didn't want to jinx it, but you had to use your superstitions, I guess.
So we have about 13 people here so far, and I know it's still a couple minutes early, so we're gonna welcome everybody. Hopefully you can all hear me, hear us. If you can put something in the chat if you know where that chat is. Get used to where the chat is because we're gonna ask you to use it a little bit in a little bit. Hopefully everybody can hear. Let's see. I know Jill is on. No, Jill, if you want to. There we go. Hi, yay. That means you can hear us. Yay. Okay, great.
Hi, Jill.
We hear you. We're just going to go ahead and wait till about 7:30. Thank you, everybody. There's always a little bit of a lag in the text or in the, so I was getting nervous, like, uh-oh. We did have a webinar recently at the StudyPro where we had a speaker, and I think like there was a small part of the population of the listeners who couldn't hear at all, and everybody else could hear fine, and we couldn't figure out what was going on because it seemed like so many people like, I can hear, and then like, where is there sound? I can't hear anything. So it was really frustrating, but
And luckily the recording had all the sound,
yes,
but
yes.
Debbie's doing a great job of moderating and facilitating that, and I'm in the background trying to figure out troubleshoot how could it possibly be different for everyone. I'm like, what variable am I not considering of why the sound might not be right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Some
anyway.
people were able to like do something fancy and figure out how to figure out how to get the sound to work, like turn off their Wi-Fi or rejoin or use a different browser, but hopefully that won't happen here. All right. 7:30, we have about 30 people. And so, as we said, maybe Jan will just give it one more minute and then let you start. We were really excited about this topic, Janet. It's the first time we've done this specific topic. So this is new material for your audience here.
I'm excited.
Yeah, new, the material, of course, the strategies are all tried and true, but putting them together in this particular format is new. So no one get too worried.
Well, since we're at 7:31, I will kick us off. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Janet Pence, and I am a volunteer with the Yorktown High School PTA. I serve as the activities chair, bringing webinars such as these to the Yorktown community, and we extend an invitation for a number of programs to all of the high schools in Arlington. And for this particular topic and others, we have extended invitations to our middle school parents as well. So if you are the parent of a middle schooler, like I am, welcome. And I know you'll love the session tonight. We've had the StudyPro before, and it's always been a big hit with our parent community. So I'm just absolutely thrilled to bring them back again this year. I'd like to give a short introduction of our speakers tonight. Debbie Rosen and Lindsey Thoms are the owners of the StudyPro, an executive function and study skills center in McLean, Virginia. The StudyPro works with students to help them better manage the process of school. This means helping students become better planners, time managers, initiators, organizers, and work completers. Most students aren't taught these skills, yet they are so deeply needed to be successful at school and throughout their careers. And if you want more information on their service, you can see them online at thestudypro.com. And with that, I will turn it over to Lindsey and Debbie.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much, Janet. We're super excited to be here, and thank you and welcome to all of you on this rainy evening. We really are grateful that you're here, and we really enjoy this topic. As I was saying earlier, it's the first time we've given this specific presentation, so we are excited to share it with all of you. My name is Debbie Rosen. With me on the other, on your left or right, depending on which you're looking. On my right is Lindsey Thoms. We are both the owners of the StudyPro, and we know a lot about homework resistance because we actually run and are having right at this moment a very packed homework center. We really do focus on the process of school. As you may know, there's the content, the actual math, science, history, etc. And that's really where intelligence and IQ really may come in because you may gravitate to the particular subjects. But then there's the process, right? And we all know that if we don't have the right process in place to be able to manage the workload, that we really can't demonstrate our true intelligence. So we want for kids to reduce their anxiety and to feel more confident by learning the process that it takes to manage their work independently. So why are we here tonight? Well, there's three big things that we're going to cover. One of them is really just taking a look at why are we battling. We don't want to just cover ground that says, why are we battling? We all know what we're battling about. But what we really want to do is sit back and ask ourselves, what exactly is motivating the battles or the conflicts that I'm having in my particular family. And the reason why we want to ask that question is because until we really understand that, then we can't necessarily change the way we may be communicating to affect a different result. We also want to look underneath what's going on with the battles and understand what skills we really want to build. Of course, if you've heard us speak before, you know that executive functions include things like initiation, inhibition, emotional control, three things that are very involved when it comes to can I start my homework and push through my homework. Other skills like self-monitoring. And so we're going to go through those really quickly and help you understand what are maybe the underdeveloped skills or that and how can we approach, as a parent, helping to build those skills with our students. And then, as I just started to say, what strategies can we use to flip the script? So if we're having some arguments or some tension around homework, what can we do to hopefully change that and kind of sit on the same side of the table as our student? And so we're going to really start by asking you to participate, as I said in this first part, and really looking into the, why are we battling? And we're wondering if you would put in the chat, when you're thinking about why are we battling, yes, we know the answer. Maybe I'm battling because my student doesn't get started, et cetera. But what are your goals, right? So is it that you're worried that the students, aren't going to do well in life, or that they may have challenges with if they have challenges with this particular content matter, then they won't get in a particular school. So I'm just wondering if you can share in the chat, what are some of the reasons why, the whole concept of homework might stress you out or you may be battling.
And Debbie, while they're adding to the chat, I can tell a story from right before this webinar. I had a family in my office here, and a lot of the why we're battling is they might be managing it now, but I anticipate in middle school it's going to get harder. And then it's only going to get harder in high school, or it's only get harder in college. And then, I see that, want my child to live up to their potential. That's what's so hard as parents is we might see all their skills, all their abilities, and then that might not be reflected at school and in their grades. Or, yep, that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot of great answers here. Worried about my son getting further behind if he doesn't really get it. making sure that they live up to their potential, but building good habits for later, concern the homework will be late and affect the GPA, which is affecting college acceptance, building good study habits for later years, college acceptance, that they don't realize their amazing potential, which is so fair, right? We all are very worried about those things. So those are great answers. We really appreciate it and appreciate you being so honest and digging deep for that. And then I think the second question is really, what do these battles look like? Do you want to go ahead and take it from there, Lindsay?
I mean, when Debbie and I first started arranging this webinar and brainstorming a little bit, a lot of the question I had was, what do they look like? And I can imagine, and I can almost picture into your homes right now that there could be like a Cold War happening, that there's a lot of quiet, simmering battles that haven't exploded yet. There might be some explosive types of battles, but go ahead and add to the chat. When there is a battle, and specifically around homework, what does it look like? I could also add a little bit of what does it sound like? I know that certainly when I was growing up, a slammed door or two might have been what it sounded like in my home when there was homework battles. Nagging,
Nagging,
yes.
Jeanette. Yep. Hi, Jeanette. Yeah, a lot of nagging. I'm assuming that it's
Tone
really
of voice,
screaming.
tone of voice, definitely.
Yeah, resentment, asking how I can help him, and he just tunes me out. Silence and tears. Yep, a lot of that stuff. Anxiety. Rather argue than actually do homework. Yep, I know that, Richard. I have a couple of those here. Sunday night tears behind some late night. Yep, that's definitely what a lot of it looks like. And then I think we lost Lindsay for a second. And then the third is that really a question of like when. So, when we think about like when does it happen? I know we just heard the question of Sunday night, behind some late night, is when it happens. Um, and so do we have any other questions about like when at night? When does it happen? So is it typically like after they should have started already? Is it late into the night, last week of the marketing period? That's helpful. Every excuse has a lot of yelling about how stupid it is. Yep, yep, yep. Well, I just hope that this, after I check parent view, yes, and Janet, we're going to be talking about that because we all have that view, but then it's hard, we don't necessarily have the tools to do anything about it. So we were just talking, Lindsay, about how when this all happens and under the marking period, every weeknight after school, sometimes the entire weekend. Yep. Well, I hope that one of the things we take away from this is that we're not alone. I speak to so many parents every week and every month, and a lot of times parents say, "Does this sound familiar to you?" I'm like, "Oh my gosh, yes." You and all of Northern Virginia, Maryland, DC, right? We're all kind of having these battles at night. So, I'll start from here and then Lindsay, you can add in. But I think what we want to talk a little bit about is that we want to share that we believe that a lot of the homework battles come from mismatched communication. So we have certain expectations which are valued. We of course want parents to have expectations. We validate that expectations are important. But then some of the communication that we have is a little bit mismatched. So we might say something in terms of trying to help, and then what they assume is, you just think that I'm not capable. Lindsay, do you want to add to that?
No, absolutely. And I think what you were saying about the expectations, and this is what we want to start with, giving you some tools as parents, is to understand that yes, your expectations can and will remain the same, but how would like communication and how we approach that strategy is how we can really infect that change. So we'll kind of go through maybe an example of an expectation that many of you might have. So Debbie, I think you might have this expectation for your children or have had that expectation for your students before.
Yep. I definitely expect that, my students should come home and start their homework after school. And why is that? Why is that? Because that's just the right thing to do, because they're less tired, because it's, we know it's good for them to get it out of the way. And Lindsay, what is that student thinking?
Yeah. So
What do they expect?
speak to that certainly what they might be expecting is I'm planning to do my homework after dinner. And what Debbie was naming is I know it's the right thing to do because of your life experiences, what you've noticed, what you've seen from your child, that they're more focused earlier in the afternoon, that you've seen when it gets harder to start after dinner. And what I'll say from the students' point of view is they do expect to plan and do their homework after dinner because future me can always achieve more than present me. So present me right now after school is having a hard time getting started. But future me after dinner, that's going to be all of a sudden, that's when my motivation is going to. But the key is they don't have that experience yet to know that that motivation doesn't just magically appear. We need strategies around it. So that's one of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, and I'll just add very quickly that one of the themes you're going to start to see is that it's not that your student is not being honest, it's that they themselves really do believe this is true, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so what I expect, I want them to put their phone away when doing homework, because otherwise it's like, oh, look, something just came up. I'm going to look at my phone, right? Even though I'm in the middle of a webinar, in the middle of my homework, because we know it will limit distractions. And what are their expectations, Lindsay?
Yeah, their expectations is from their life experiences that they need it. They have their notes. They took a picture of the board. They have music that has helped and comforted them. And so they believe and they have this expectation that I can't get the work done without it. And I think we can all relate to the feeling of discomfort that might come if someone came right now and said, I'm going to take your phone. If you were going into a meeting or you were going into a play or a movie, you might have that expectation that you're going to turn the phone off and not feel that discomfort. But if someone suddenly came and said, you need to put your phone away, we would all suddenly feel discomfort. And
Mhm.
that's what they're feeling too. So it's not that that expectation has to change, because Debbie is very right. And every parent here is very right that cell phones are one of the biggest distractions. And the last perspective I'll just have you think about is it's uncomfortable for us. And we can remember a time without smartphones. We can all remember a time without the internet and social media the way it exists today. Their whole lives have grown up with that expectation and that comfort wrapped around them. Even if they didn't get a cell phone or a smartphone till later in life, they can't remember a time when that didn't exist. So
Yeah.
that perspective helps with the strategies.
And Lindsay, they're doing something that they anticipate is going to be hugely uncomfortable. And then we're taking away something that's going to make it even more uncomfortable, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what's an example of assumptions, right? So we know that we have all these expectations, and we know that they may be struggling. So we say, hey, have you started your homework yet? And the assumption is like, I'm helping them get started. But what are they hearing, Lindsay?
Yeah, I mean, this is when parents very genuinely walk into a battle they didn't even know was existing. They thought, hey, I'm helping. I'm noticing they're having trouble getting started. I'm going to ask them this question. Now, what the student is feeling is I'm stressed out from school all day, and the assumption that they jump to, because that's an uncomfortable feeling, is they don't trust me. And the reality is they don't trust themselves. So every time that they set an intention to do something and they don't have the skills or the ability to start, then what that feels like, it puts this brick in this wall of awful, which is a great video. I encourage you to Google it. But every time I set an intention and I can't, it puts this very real feeling brick of emotion, this wall of emotion built up around the task. So I don't trust myself to be able to get over that wall of awful. I don't trust myself to have the skills or strategies to get through it. But because that's uncomfortable, it becomes you. It becomes you as the parent. You don't trust me. You don't believe in me. But if you just hear those words and hear the tone and the yelling and the slammed doors, then what you're going to try to replace it with, I don't trust me. I don't trust me. I don't believe in me. I don't think I'm going to be able to get into college. Every time you hear that, you don't think of this of me. Where they are developmentally right now, just think in your head, it's I. Just flip it around. But that's a very real assumption that a lot of them have and feel.
So another assumption we might make is that if we ask them, hey, why don't you check over your work? Because if they cared about their grades, they would definitely check their work before they turned it in, right? And so they, of course, feel.
Yes, it just took so much emotional effort, Debbie, to get started on this assignment. So now you want me to go back and restart? I just depleted my entire tank in order to get it done. And done feels good. Done feels like relief. Done feels like satisfaction. And what we do unintentionally, we're trying to help. Our assumption is that we're helping, is we deplete that tank again. So they depleted their tank of their resources and their skills in order to get that homework done. And then by us reminding them and prompting them to go back and recheck, the little bit of dopamine, that little bit of good feeling of satisfaction that rebuilt, dumps again. But that doesn't mean, the takeaway is not that you are not supposed to expect that they try their best, that they do their best work, that they check their work before they turn it in. That is not to say that they should throw that goal and that expectation out the window. Just because it's hard doesn't mean it has to be hard forever, but the right solutions can make it easier.
So why are we telling you all of this? Why are we saying that? Not because, as we said over and over again, because we don't think you should have expectations or even assumptions, but really because what we want to try to do is close the gap between the language that we use and the language that they hear so that we can actually be more helpful, right? And that, again, as it says, the expectations don't have to change, but it's possible that our approach does. Why? You say, okay, well, they're the ones maybe not doing their homework. Why should we change our expectations? Because we're the only ones we can change, right? So we know that what we want to do is not get stuck at the layer that we're fighting at, but get hopefully to a place where we can be more supportive. And, so Lindsey, I'm going to um, move it to the next slide, which is really what Janet was mentioning, that like, hey, when I see this, what do I do?
Janet says she was identifying, like, when does this happen? When I check this, and you might see something like this that
For
all
parent view.
for parent view, right? And you see these red alerts that show missing, or you show zeros, or you show poor results on a test grade or a quiz. And when we have that feeling of panic, this is information. And when we do not have the tools to do something about it, a lot of us here, we feel, you see it all the time, I want to fix it. I'm a fixer. I've achieved a lot in life by being able to be a problem solver. So when I see this, what's activated in me is fix it, problem solve. And so, but right, it goes wrong, and where we feel like there's the stress reaction is when we don't have the tools to actually fix it. So we tell you this because the takeaway here is that the students and parents have the same goals, right? They don't like seeing that either. I had a student here, we check and we help students plan here every night. And a student had to advocate to me right now saying, I don't mind if all the staff see my grades, but seeing it myself ruins my day. And it correlated with me. It's like, oh, when I see a bad picture of myself, right? You can try to get out of that, but they don't feel that they have the same reaction as you. I don't like seeing that mistake. I feel disappointed about that bad grade. I don't like when homework takes too long or I stay up too late and struggling to get it started. They have the same feelings of discomfort. Where parents and students are aligned is in the what, but what they're missing is the how to solve that problem, the how to rectify it. So that's where we're going to help you get on the same page and flip that script a little today.
Yeah. And, just as we're transitioning to the next slide, I would say that a lot of times, again, as we talk to parents, we hear, that they're not motivated, that they don't care. And I know it's kind of easy to believe that sometimes because you think that's what their behavior is showing. But, when we work with the students and we talk with the students, we know that's not the case. They really don't know how to solve the problem. They don't know how to, increase their initiation or increase their inhibition or increase their emotional control or, working memory or some of these other executive function skills to solve the problem. And so what do we end up doing? If we assume that they don't care, or if they get anxious and they don't have the tools, well, what they do is they avoid, shut down, argue, distract themselves, right? And what we do is we punish, incentivize, and argue. And what we're here to say, of course, in the first part of this presentation is that, but really when we do all of those things, what skills are we building? How is that really helping to solve the true underlying problem? And so, to build the skills, we really have to understand what that true kind of underlying challenges are. And so going into kind of part 2 of the presentation, we want to talk about what really are some common homework challenges. And of course, we could focus on a lot. There's test taking, there's a whole bunch of other things, but we really wanted to start with 3 common homework challenges that we see all the time. Is getting started, rushing through, and then getting distracted. And so to talk a little bit about what some of the challenges are from an executive function perspective, Lindsey's going to kind of share what executive functions are, what the executive functions are, and then how do they kind of feed into these specific challenges.
This is what Debbie was referring to as the skills that we need to build. Like, so what is important to note is that when you think about the challenges that Debbie was just mentioning about getting started, so all these skills that you see here on the screen is about setting a goal and being able to achieve it. So an obvious executive function skill that you might need to get started is initiation. That just means being able to start on a task. However, I'm going to draw your attention to two others that might not be as obvious. And one might be that emotional control. So getting started, I'm sure you've heard your students say many times before, I don't feel like it. That's that I'll feel like it later, right? They might have gotten in a fight with their friend, right? They might just be feeling down, had a bad night of sleep, and having that emotional connection to it and that barrier around that assignment. So it makes it a whole lot harder to get started. I might be worried about it being such a big percentage of my grade that makes it a big barrier to get started. So that's a piece of that emotional control. And then certain things like your working memory, your ability to hold on to information and apply it, can make students rush through their work, because going back and rereading and going back and rechecking is a skill that requires, it's taxing on their working memory. And if that skill isn't developed yet, that can lead to rushing. And of course, also the inhibition skill I'll point your attention to is that, can I delay gratification? Can I control my impulses? Can I hear that ding on my phone and not check it? That can feel like torture. It can feel like torture to students. And I do know a couple adults, myself included, that using that inhibition skill to ignore that distraction is very difficult. So all of those are related in the skills that we want to support with strategies to overcome those common barriers. So
Lindsay, I just wanted to add a couple of things really quickly too. Is one is that, if you've heard us speak before, or you know a lot about executive functions, they're developmental. And so what that means is that they will slowly develop into adult level executive functions, so that we as adults, generally speaking, are better at planning, organizing, managing to the goals that we have throughout the day. What we know is that with kids that and to just put some numbers to it, really around 14 years old is when we start to develop the adult level executive functions, and then the brain develops from the back to the front. And so this is where the prefrontal cortex is, where it houses the executive functions and where they're developed. And so what's important to remember is that these kids that are in middle school and high school are really just at the beginning of the journey of developing their executive functions. And it's very possible that if they have ADHD or low underdeveloped executive functions, or just more late developed executive functions, that they may just not really have kind of some of the executive function, those skills and abilities kind of coming naturally, not until they're in their teens or early 20s. So they're getting ready to go to college. I know for my son, I felt like his kind of came online at like 20 or 21, and slowly I've seen them build just in his ability to inhibit, have emotional control around particular assignments. And then the second thing I wanted to add is that, we often talk to students a lot about, when they look at an assignment, how many times has it happened that they thought the assignment was going to be a 5 in terms of a 1 to 5 of how hard it's going to be. And then when they opened it up, how hard was it? It was maybe like a 1 or a 2. And so that, just assuming about that assignment, is that like emotional control, then I'm going to avoid it because I think that it's going to be, so much harder than I really think. And so, this is just another example of where that emotional control can affect the initiation, or cause them to potentially avoid.
Mhm. And this is kind of just that summary of what we were just talking about, is when we see a student having difficulty getting started, and then your expectation can and should remain the same, that they start after school when they get home. However, there can be multiple barriers to where that initiation is happening. There can be all of them. I just had that family in my office said all of them were a clean sleep across the board. These are all barriers. And I think there's a lot that we, even as adults, can relate to that can make it harder for us to get started too, on a setting an intention to accomplish a goal, a task, and there might be these barriers here. Now, we start with this awareness because when we have awareness, that's the first step that we can find the right tool and the right strategy for that. So I'll point out the one here that is very, very needed to be strategized around is it's not due for a few days or weeks. And that's one of the telltale signs that, oh, future me is going to do it. Future me will take care of it. I have enough time. That I heard that saying, and it rings true, that there is nothing more demotivating to getting started than having enough time, because we're missing that urgency that really we can become dependent on for initiation. So we make kids aware of this, because then it's it's not me that's the problem, or it's not my parent that's the problem. Oh, okay. It's because I feel like I don't have that urgency. So then we can be able to strategize around it. And thinking about that initiation and all those skills that we were just talking about, this is the reminder that just because we're not seeing the task being started, the homework being started, doesn't mean that they don't have the same goals as us as parents. So think about all of the steps that you see on your screen to get their homework done. So I can't say that they have a goal to like homework or they want to have a goal to start their homework, but they do all have the goal to do the best they can. And they do all have the goal to feel that satisfaction of being done. So that goal is true. But think about all these steps. So your executive functions help you achieve a goal, but look at how many different goals are within that one goal of getting started on my homework, completing it, turning it in, and showing my best effort, living up to my potential. So it starts when the teacher assigns homework, but then I have to use all my executive function skills throughout this entire process. And once we have that awareness that it's not just about them being motivated to do well, we can help. That's lowered our barrier as well. So a famous saying that we have around here that is that there's just no such thing as just or should. Those are those dirty words, like they just need to put it in a planner. They just need to look at Canvas. They just need to sit down and do it. Or if they want to get into college, they should be motivated to do this, right? Or they're in 10th grade now. They should be able to do this without my help. All those words just help. It's about trying to teach them what to do and then help them actually enact it through those strategies here. Some of those just and shoulds put another barrier and brick in that wall. So what we're going to talk about now is just what are the tools that we can use. So now that we kind of have our own awareness as parents, what tools can we use? How can we help strategize around these barriers? So starting with that first one, the getting started, because we love strategies for this because it wraps around a lot of different areas. So one of our favorite ones is a start routine. And if I connect you back to the barrier of that emotional control or the barrier of I don't know what I have to do, a start routine can help encompass a strategy around that. So a start routine is any 3 little key actions that you do every day to help you get started. You have a process. If you think about your own day and your routine that you've developed over the years, you probably have one yourself. It might be, okay, I get up, I have my morning coffee, I check my email, I make my to-do list. Now, when we make the kids aware that this is a strategy that they can use, what little 3 trigger actions, steps can you take that it's not 0 to 60 saying, oh, it's time to start your homework. Let's start your start routine. Let's brainstorm some ideas for what that start routine might look like. And so on the next slide, we have some ways to have this conversation with your students that's really beneficial for them to be aware of. It's just not the willpower way. It's not the just willpower way through getting started on your homework. You have to use a strategy. So there's these kind of categories that help create a start routine, an effective start routine. So you can lower the barriers. That's about pairing something that you like versus something that you don't like homework. You don't have to like homework. You don't have to like checking Canvas. But what we can like is music or sipping on your favorite drink or kind of changing into your comfy clothes. This was for me because I went to Catholic school, but putting on fuzzy socks or slippers, chewing gum, getting a snack, all of those are examples of kind of lowering the emotional barrier, setting the right mood for getting started on your homework. And then making it novel or new can help. Try a different location, or you see some other suggestions there, like even just switching the desktop on your computer screen can help make the screen look novel, and it's just not the low dopamine of seeing the same thing every day. And then the last one is a strategy category about removing barriers. It's kind of future thinking of saying, hey, what's the kind of, how can I set myself up for a successful night here? So what's a good strategy? I can plug my phone in across the room. I could turn on airplane mode. It's not that my parents are taking it away from me. It's just part of my start routine. And then the last one that we always say is a great one for the go task is just let's make a plan. So let's make a plan, and that helps reduce the barrier of I don't know what I even have to do. And let's preview it, as Debbie says, because that lowers that emotional barrier of the assumptions. Get back to that assumption that can be a huge barrier for why I'm having trouble getting started, because I'm assuming it's going to take forever. I'm assuming I can't do it. I'm going to assume it's very hard. So by creating a start routine, they're wrapping up in a bunch of different strategies that already starts to make getting started a little bit easier. And we have a bunch more here, so we'll go through them, but
yeah. I just want to add a couple of things, which, one of them is you hear the words that we're using a lot about strategies and barriers. I mean, we use that language very specifically because we really, when we want to, help kids to get started, we don't want to keep anything a secret from them, right? So we talk about specific executive functions. We know initiation is hard. Oh yeah, maybe like, really anxiety provoking when you don't know exactly what it looks like. So maybe we take a look at this assignment. And so, one of the things we're going to talk a little bit about later is trying to create a system so it's not us battling against our kids, but instead using a system. And one of the things we want to do is to help them devise hopefully a start routine as part of the system so that we know what it is every day that we can be doing, that and they have say into it, right? It's their say. They get to choose the things that are part of the start routine, and maybe
Great.
we can brainstorm together.
That's perfect. And I just have to take Debbie's question in the chat here because I think it's a really good and relevant one here, because the same as over assuming how long something's going to take, there can be the counterpoint of they're under assuming. They're saying it's going to take less time, and then they put it off, and then they can't get started, or it takes a very long time once they realize what it is. So a strategy there is same thing, use a start routine. If they're saying, hey, I'm going to start after dinner, okay, well, let's do a start routine and let's make a plan. Like before we make a decision, that's the system that Debbie was talking about. Like before we make a decision on something, let's use that strategy. Let's preview the assignment. Let's make a plan. And a lot of times we use this here too. Students come in, I don't have a lot of work tonight. Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Okay, let's make a plan. Let's see what you have. Oh, I got to leave in an hour. Oh, okay. Let's take a look and let's look at your plan. I'm not going to disagree. I'm not going to argue in that moment. I'm not going to justify why they need to stay longer. It's just that, okay, it's the plan that's going to decide, not me and not
Yeah.
the parent. Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I would mention too, Lindsay, is that we just recently did a writing workshop and we talked a lot about how, one of the things that kids put off because they think it's maybe not going to take too much time is a paper, right? Like, oh, it's only like 5 paragraphs or whatever. It won't take too much time. Because what they're seeing is maybe that it's 5 paragraphs, so they're not actually seeing that there's like a whole bunch of other requirements. So one of the things we suggest is that anything that is more than like a math worksheet or something that you can clearly see, um, you know, almost the amount of time that it might take, is that the very first day it's assigned. Part of the system that we use and part of the strategies is that we're going to just, Lindsay's going to talk about this, to, look at the directions and just highlight those things that are, the requirements. And then, look, you don't have to get started on the whole paper. All we're going to do is just look at the requirements tonight. That's when it's assigned. And so, obviously, I'm assuming, Debbie, that your question is about something that they're putting off, either to later in the evening or to, days later because it's not due for a little while. And so hopefully if we can, as soon as it's assigned, at least just go through and kind of get in the habit of highlighting just the requirements, that would hopefully give them a better, like a more realistic view of what it is. And so there's a question about what if they don't want your help to make a plan, and we can kind of answer that one a little bit later if you want, Lindsay, or answer
Yeah, I
that
think I'll
now.
give you a little preview, but we'll go through the next chunk of strategies here. But the little preview is ask more than you tell. Like, so I'll give you some strategies and some phrases that you can use to basically, the goal is to help your kid accept your help and your experience, your life experience of helping to make a plan. However, there's some strategies that we're going to talk in the back half of our presentation today that will go and answer that question a little bit more specifically. But right now we're talking just a little bit more about some language that can help, is strategies that can help on-ramp them into the assignment. So again, not, hey, the goal isn't to start your homework. That's very vague. And I really can't picture what start my homework might look like. So my brain's going to assume it's going to take forever, it's going to be very difficult, or it's only going to take 5 minutes. But then when I open it up, I might have some barriers. So how can we on-ramp into the assignment? So you see some suggestions here. And what you'll notice is that the goal is really just to understand the assignment, see it, preview it, make it digestible, connect with it. I love the ideas diagram, like drawing on the whiteboard, and help make that part feel a little bit more enjoyable, pleasurable, but it also just helps them understand that assignment and get going. And then a ball in motion can stay in motion. And using the words of on-ramp is, let's just find an on-ramp for that assignment. Let's find any little intersection. That might be it. And if they're, even if it's a chunked assignment that Debbie was referring to, like what's this, if you ask a question and say, hey, what's the smallest possible thing that you could do today? What's the smallest chunk we can come up with? What would be the first step of this? then you're helping them, and it's not you saying, hey, you really should get started on that today. You really should pick your topic today. And just asking that question helps. And then some other examples of on-ramps is simplifying or helping to own that document and help own that question is we have a couple different ways to take a big, scary, maybe writing or reading prompt and make it digestible. So one word might be break apart the prompt. And I very literally, it's saying, hey, I see this question from my teacher and I just hit enter and I break it apart so I see it as separate units. And then another might be connect to a keyword, like what in this prompt, this sentence, this phrase can I connect with? And Debbie has a very good experience with that prompt on the screen here about how do I show up? If you ask that a student that, what does that actually mean? What does it mean to show up? Where, let's see, where are some people who, what are some people who have shown up for you in your life? When have you shown up for other people in their lives? And help connect to what word or what keyword might be in that prompt that you can start with and start pulling on that thread. And then one of my favorites is the last one you see on the screen, like the cut the fluff. There's a lot of filler sometimes or over explaining in directions and over explaining in a prompt maybe. So you see that example in the bottom right hand corner of your screen here that has this very, very wordy prompt. And how we might be able to help a student there is like, let's copy and paste it and cut all that fluff out. And what you're left with is pick the main character trait. Why is that trait important?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same exact prompt, but it's more digestible and it makes it easier to on-ramp and get into that assignment. So it's not going 0 to 60 like you would on the highway. You got to on-ramp and ease your way into it. So those were specific ones, but I know that math is also a very telling or barrier prone assignment. So this is an example for that was both about initiation and for a student with working memory. I was describing earlier that sometimes students might rush through their work or might have difficulty initiating on math assignments like this and worksheets like this. So even though they might know the content,
I think we might have lost Lindsey. Or maybe it was me that we lost. I don't know. Maybe you guys can let me know if you can hear me speaking.
Yeah, we can hear you, and I think
Okay.
Lindsey
Yeah.
froze.
Okay, no, Lindsey. Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. So basically what she was saying with on-ramps is getting started with math is, there's a lot of different ways that we can, I think what happens is when kids see these types of worksheets, they tend to get overwhelmed. And so there's a lot of ways that we can help their working memory. You see that little orange sticky on it, just kind of making sure that, the on-ramp would be like, let's just make sure that we're really understanding what the symbols mean, right? Or, how do we help with the working memory so that we kind of give confidence in terms of what that is, what the specific math assignment might be. Other things that we've done with math is, when it's harder to get started is, um, just doing the odds, just doing the evens, making sure that, you're getting up, as Lindsey said, like on a whiteboard and just changing the directions. I mean, changing the location of what you're doing. And so really the whole idea of on-ramping is that what we want to try to do is to make what might feel like a very large barrier for kids kind of a smaller barrier. And there was a question about when kids don't want your help. um, Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes kids don't want their help because it's less helpful, whereas other times if we can say, look, let's just look at this, and for the first night we're just going to reword the questions so that if it's a bunch of English questions that they may not understand, we're going to reword and kind of create some ideas, just some bullets of things that you can then kind of key off of. And I know there was a question too, Lindsey, which we're going to probably address a little bit later, more in the back half, about what do we do with a high school who just doesn't want you to interfere at all. And so I just want to make sure that we address that. And I think chunking is probably a good way um, to kind of talk about that in context, and then I can kind of turn it over to you, because it is very hard when the high school kids are like, okay, back off, we don't want you, I don't want you anywhere near. And so that's really where I think we can try to at least agree side by side on a system, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But we can also hopefully have an open dialogue with them about, hey, I know you don't want me to get involved in actually getting your work done, but what about using some strategies, right, such as the chunking? So do you want to talk a little bit about that, Lindsay?
Yeah, I mean, the chunking one is one that we as adults try very often to help with because we know the experience. We know the experience of doing something last minute, or we've seen the pain from our students trying to push and finish something last minute. It's not their best quality, or they don't get it done. And there's a lot of stress around that. So we know the chunking skill, but students also know that that can be a strategy, but they don't know how. So that's what Debbie was referring to earlier, is just how can we help them learn how to chunk? So one of the ways that she was describing was saying, how on the first day can we take a syllabus, take a rubric, take a assignment sheet for a long-term paper project and break it apart and move it into chunks. So we have a little anagram here that I won't read exactly everything here, but basically helps them follow through on the steps. And this is something we teach in the class. I think what helps to answer the question earlier is, when are these battles happening, and acknowledging, hey, if it's 2 days before and we're trying to help and teach them the strategies, then maybe not the most well received because the tensions are high and the stress levels are high, and our frontal lobes that are already in a developmental state for our kids are going to be even more shut down under stress. So, but what can help is just say, like, oh, hey, I heard about this interesting strategy today. And what I literally did this yesterday with a student is I printed out something for another student, or I printed out something for myself. And I was just saying, I don't even know where to start. Like, what should I look for? Let's try to find the important information. And the student ended up helping me. So if that's something that you can ever do for your older student, is you just talk to them like a human being, talk to them like the almost adult that they will be soon in high school, and just say, hey, I heard about this thing. I was interested if we could try it together. Hey, I have this big overwhelming email and I don't even know where to start. I got all these directions from my boss and I want to try this chunking strategy. Why don't you sit with me and we'll figure it out together? And kind of giving them and opening up that space, that it's not you versus them on their assignment and what they didn't do and what they have a failure for and they don't have the skill for yet, because that just puts that wall up again. But using the language and having languages around strategies help. So when you call it the chunk it strategy, and then we'll show you kind of what it looks like, is basically what I was describing earlier, is that fluff or that filler is all of that top of this very scary and overwhelming assignment sheet or this rubric. And a lot of times we'll say to the students is, I don't know about you, but my emotion when I first saw this was overwhelm. Like, what emotion or feeling did you see when you see this? And all of a sudden, when they see you and them on the same page, that they had the same reaction, it humanizes that interaction. Versus when we go into help and we go through the, hey, I'm going to fix it. Hey, I'm going to solve this for you. And say, hey, we're going to get started on this today. They're not feeling that motivation. You're trying to rah-rah and cheerlead them through it, but they're not there yet. So it just acknowledge the reality that I might need a strategy because I'm feeling overwhelmed, even as the adult, even as the professional here. Seeing all those words on the page is overwhelming. So we're going to cut out all the fluff. Let's eliminate all the filler and then see if we can find what the key actual words are that I need here to make it digestible. And then I can find my chunks by saying, oh, okay, now there's actually 10 requirements. Like I have to have 10 different like chunks or steps to this. I have to create an annotated bibliography. I might have to pick a topic. I might have to have research. And then I can create my checklist here that helps me chunk it down. So if I have 10 maybe chunks or piece checklists and I have 5 days, I could do 2 a day. And then asking some of those questions to them, say, okay, well, we got 10 chunks. How many days would we have to work on this? Yep. And then you can help them have some autonomy and choice in like how their plan actually looks. A lot of the times when we try to help, we might be going in from the directive point of view, where it might be we have to ask more questions about it. They get to the same conclusion, believe it or not. They get to the same remedy there, but they're more willing to accept, and it's more effective when they feel part of the process, as we all do. We're humans. We want to feel that we have that control.
And I'm just going to add that, when we had a writing workshop, both for middle school and high school, and we had, 40 or 50 kids there, we said, if you had a paper that looked like this, imagine this without the highlights, what would your temperature be on a 1 to 5? And, almost the entire room is like 5. And what do you do when you're at 5? If you have this 6 to 8 page paper and you have this rubric and that's assigned, it's due in 2 weeks, and they're all like 5. And what's amazing is, they very openly said, well, then what do you do when it's a 5? We avoid. There was a lot of other words used, but it's like we avoid. And we said, okay, well, what if we just asked you the very first night, if all we asked you to do was to print it off or do this online and just to hunt for what it isn't fluff, the only things that, are really the actual requirements of the paper. And, we had a little kind of T chart for like what the requirements were and what kind of paper it was. And if I said to you, okay, as Lindsay said, these little I'm pointing at the screen as though you can see me, but on the left in the middle, you see those little squares. Those are like, requirements so that they can check it off when they're done. And, I said, what if I asked you if to do just that the first night? And I said, I mean, being very honest, how many people would say, okay, that's all I have to do the first night? Okay. And so many people raise their hand. Okay, I'd be willing to do that. I said, and what's the benefit, do you think, if you were like, say you did procrastinate and it's like now 3 nights later and you're going to go back and look at this, what do you have to read? Do you have to read the whole thing again? No, just have to read the yellow. So you can see that we took something that's a huge barrier, like I don't even want to look at it, it's a 5, I don't like it, and then it's like make it easier for them to get started. And the other thing we shared, and then we're going to move on, is that a lot of times kids get stuck because they don't know, like they see something and like, I don't know. And another big point that we made and is that I don't know is it could be a good thing, because if you ask yourself, what don't I know? If the paper is about, free speech, is, should free speech be allowed? One of the questions, and you say, I don't know, great, what don't I know? Do I know if free speech, I don't know what free speech is. I don't know what, who monitors free speech. I don't know. And it's just about asking what, when, where, why, what about that you're already kind of putting yourself in a direction to move about that topic. So there's a lot of things that I think, after talking to hundreds and thousands of kids over all the times that we've done these workshops and webinars and classes, I mean, it really does move the needle for them in terms of being able to use these kinds of strategies to get started.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on to rushing through.
Rushing through. So the two big like named kind of strategies that you can think of is giving them strategies to visualize what they're going to check for and when they're going to check for. So we often ask them to check over their work, make sure, have you checked over your work? That's how we're prompting them to self-monitor and not rush through and catch careless mistakes. Now, we're doing that. If we do that at the end, when they do that, when they're done, when they're reaching for the cell phone, when they're headed up the stairs or they're headed out the door, that's going to deplete that motivation, going to start the battle. So pre-planning, having them think like, okay, well, why don't you pick a spot where you're actually going to stop and self-monitor, and then helping them visualize the finish line. And that's where, when we say there's some resistance to helping them plan or even making plan in general, if you start using these words, it helps them lower the temperature and be more accepted into that help. If you say, well, we make a plan because it actually helps with that finish line, so we can visualize the finish line. And they might say, well, I'm going to work on my history paper. Just be like, okay, let's bring that finish line a little bit closer. Why don't you just, a goal could be printing it off and doing that chunk it strategy, or picking your topic today. So when you bring the finish line closer, it actually helps them self-monitor and helps them see that end goal. And so I'll move on the next slide is a little bit more about how we can help them with the getting distracted. Because I think we can all agree that getting distracted is a big barrier and a big cause for homework battles that might be having. So getting together and collaborating with your child, no matter where they are, even if they're high school, and just talking to them about some distractions that might be there. It's not a punishment. As we said, if we don't have the tools and language around strategies, then we're saying, hey, you lost privileges to your phone. It's okay. And give that permission to parents to say, hey, it's okay to have expectations, and it's okay to have consequences. But when is that happening? If you walk in and they're on their phone and they were supposed to be doing their homework, then it just became, okay, my parents are the worst. All my other friends are allowed to have their phone. They're all chatting me, and my mom's the mean one or my dad's the mean one. They took my phone, and they're not learning that they actually need a strategy there. Like, what's the barrier? So talking with them away from that homework battle and saying, hey, here's some strategies that we can use. Even just putting grayscale on your phone helps lower that dopamine feedback loop that they're having, or having them plug in their phone out of reach. Like, let's pick a strategic place in the house that you can plug in your phone, put it on airplane mode. Using screen time, make them aware of maybe how much time it's they're spending on their phone during homework time. And a lesser known strategy that is a favorite of ours is putting your Google Chrome tabs into groups. That it's not an extension, but if you right click on a Google tab, and everyone can try it if you're using Chrome right now, if you right click on a tab, you'll see these options, and one of them is add to new group. And what you can do is start grouping your tabs together, and then you can close it. So it kind of puts it out of way, out of sight, out of mind. So instead of having a student close something that's very important to them, that it's going to start a battle if we're saying, hey, right now it's not time to go through that Wikipedia page and learn all about the revolution that you got really, really sidetracked and down that rabbit hole about. Okay, I want you to add that to that Google group tab that says stuff for later. So all of a sudden they're more willing to use that strategy there because I'm not battling their inhibition there. I'm giving them a strategy there to help reduce the distractions. Another one would just be making them aware of like what could help. Like, why does it feel so uncomfortable to have my phone? Because I'm used to having it all the time. And we fidget all day. We mess with thumbs. I have a bottle cap in my hand right now from my water bottle. So helping them connect to that it's not because that they're morally flawed or a failure, they can't reduce the distractions and put their phone away on their own. They might need a replacement there. That might be something like a novel stimulation or using something to keep their hands busy while they're getting their homework done. And then kind of summing it all up here in the next slide, what we want to say is that it is very important to connect before correcting. I kind of gave a little bit of a preview, but this is one of the favorite videos that we have, and I'll let Debbie explain a little bit more. But takeaway is just basically, hey, if I go straight in guns blazing and offer that solution, then it's going to continue that feedback loop of the battles over homework.
Mhm. We often suggest, with parents that if we think about if you work, if you were working, if you're not working, if you are working, and you had a big project or multiple big projects on your plate, and your boss came up to you and said, "Hey, it seems like you're kind of struggling with that," or implied that they're kind of struggling, how about if I just, come in and help you? You might just go, "No, no, no, I got it," right? Because you just may, maybe in your mind you are struggling with it, but you just may say you got it. And so the reason we emphasize so much about connecting before correcting, or the approach that we take with our kids, is because we want to feel like we're sitting on the same side of the table. And the truth is that empathy is feeling with people, and what it means to feel with people is you may not agree on the approach they're taking, you may not agree that they're wanting to wait till after night, and you might want to change that, which is fine, right after dinner to get started. But the truth is that they will respond better to your help if obviously they're not feeling attacked. And so we know that if empathy fuels connection, and so if you can at least feel like, hey, what does that stress feel like to them? What does it feel like when I'm being asked if I need help, when I get indignant or I get frustrated, like, what do you mean I got this, kind of thing. And so on top of that, right, their emotional brain is stronger than their rational brain as teens. They feel deeper than they do at any time in their life. And they have very little autonomy in what's going on. They have a lot of different bosses, if you will, and a lot of different expectations. And as we said, their full executive function skills aren't fully developed. And so, really, it's not about changing your expectations or accepting your behavior, but it's really about, at least saying something like, hey, um, tough day, or it seems like there's a lot going on right now. And so we wanted to give some examples of what it feels like to connect before we correct. And so, as we just were saying, and I'm going to turn this over to Lindsay, is, yeah, you must have had a long day. Is there something that you can do to recharge before you're going to get started on your homework? We talked about that start routine.
This is a good one to start, and to drive home the fact that just because you validate what they're feeling that feels real to them does not mean that you're agreeing with it or approving of this. And why I say this is a good one, because we've seen this, that it might say, I see the kid come in and say, oh, I'm so tired. And you might just see them kind of having trouble getting started. And it might be because thinking in your head, wait a second, you've had 2 hours at home. You've had time to recharge. Just because they're seeing it and then that's what they're feeling does not mean, by your validation and say, oh, you must have had a long day, does not mean that you're agreeing with that, but you are helping with the solutions there. And when you're asking them that open-ended question here, is like giving them some options. It's helping them reflect that it's not mom's the problem, mom's just trying to help me get started. It's helping them reflect of a strategy that might work. So what do you think would work? 10 minutes, 15 minutes? Or
Sorry.
the example, no, it's great. It's great to go on to the next one. It's like, I know it's frustrating not having your phone. I know it would feel very uncomfortable for me to not have my phone. So how about we take 5 minutes? Let's offer the solution. Let's email the notes from your phone to computer. Let's pick a spot in the room that it's like within sight, but out of reach. So your expectation can remain the same, but you're just going from a neutral place of offering the solutions and the strategies here. So I won't read through all of them, but I'll let you kind of look at this one here. So giving them that, what would work? Let's plan for a midway checkpoint. Having a timer, having a way to measure that time, having a way to make it the timers, the one prompting us to check through our work, not our parents coming through, that can help neutralize it too. And then this is an example of what we call it's coaching language. This is what we use all the time. Instead of going direct and head on, we help them say, like, I'm sensing, I'm noticing, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you might need a little bit of a longer runway. So what this does is it neutralizes it. It's not using you in that at all, except it's saying, I'm noticing you might need a little bit of a longer runway instead of you're having trouble getting started. So what this then does, no, that's perfect, because this is that example. So we want to make sure that we're helping come from a place of problem solving. So the tools that we were talking about today, starting all the way back with that awareness that there are these mismatched expectations and unspoken expectations, and then there's assumptions that come from that. So that awareness, to have lasting change, we got to start there. We got to have this understanding of the skills that we need to build. And then we got to have some strategy language. We got to use the language of on ramps and start routine and chunk it. And so finish line strategies. So then now we can collaborate together as the parent and the child versus having the battles of us versus them. So the problem might be initiation, and the solution can be a start routine. So we tell you all this to help you kind of put it all together here and collaborate on a system. So some of the questions were just basically like, what do you do when they want to accept help? And what we want to make sure it's the system that's going to be the prompts and not the parents. So in a neutral time, think about when those battles are happening. I want you to think when those battles are happening is not when you want to have that conversation about the system. That's not when we say, okay, that's it. Tomorrow you are starting after school. End of story. That's my expectation. I am not staying up till midnight again. I'm not seeing this stress again. You're putting your phone away. So you wanted to pick a neutral time with your student away from the battle that's actually happening when it's happening. When you see the grades and SIS, don't check SIS that day. Just don't do it. And we're going to agree on the structures and the strategies together. So wrapping it up here, we have our favorite. I'll just show that, if Debbie, if you just show, we can use a tool like this. You can get it.
Sorry.
Our white space calendar that just helps pick the time, and let's identify when you have all these appointments, so then you can agree on the time that you might be starting your homework. And then kind of just putting it all together, wrapping up here. We're going to collaborate together. We're going to agree, use that work windows calendar to agree when we're going to start our work, what strategies we can use, and let's set a time, let's set an intention to go back and reflect about what's working and what we might need a strategy for. What are some barriers there?
Yeah, and just, going back to what Lindsey was saying about, the timing, we don't want to kind of rush in and try to create a system as where the tension is building, but really maybe talking about what it would be a good time to talk about a system that would work. And so I think that's, I think that would be, go on.
Times in the car can be really effective. And if you're driving, a great time, if your students aren't driving yet, you can have some of those conversations and then put them in the driver's seat metaphorically of saying, okay, while I'm driving, I think we just came up with some good ideas. Can you email that to me? Let's share that. Let's collaborate on that together, because then you're problem solving together, which feels really good and it helps you connect there on the problem solving.
Yep, and really coming from the assumption that, they do want to be successful, that we do share the same goals, and that, hey, there may be some barriers. And, I know that it's really hard for me when I have a lot going on at work, to prioritize and to balance everything. How do you do that? It's trying to find the areas that you can connect where you feel that they are being successful. And if you can, and they will help you, let you help, trying to create some of those on ramps, or even talking about them as part of the system. What would you do How about if the first night you get a big assignment, we just look through the directions, or you just look at the directions and highlight it to make sure that you feel comfortable whether it is. Sometimes people think it's going to take a long time and it doesn't, and sometimes people think it's not going to take a long time and it does. So, we don't know until we have the evidence. And the evidence is really about looking a first night of a multi-step assignment and just making sure that we know what that looks like. And I think, as we said over and over again, the expectations don't have to change, really just the support system. And thank you for that recommendation, Beth, about the parent book, Good Inside, A Guide to Becoming a Parent You Want to Be. So there's a link in there from that. So with that, we'll just leave it to say that one of the areas that is really challenging for parents is really technology. And we have a monthly webinar that we sponsor with different experts, and we're having something on December 8th with Dr. Spector, who's like a world-renowned psychologist around technology addiction and comorbid conditions with technology, overuse of technology. So if you're interested in that, you can email info@StudyPro or use this link, which we will also put in the chat. So with that, thank you and welcome back, Janet. If you had any last words. We know we shared a lot of information there.
Yeah, in fact, I don't know, there's so many good tips that my head's spinning a little bit, and I'm glad that we record these. And for the audience, we do post these recordings so you can go back and watch again. I just feel like there's just so much tremendous good information here, and I would just like to wrap up by thanking Debbie and Lindsey from the StudyPro, and you can check out their website. And thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, and thanks for the great questions. We really appreciate it. And enjoy. I just heard from my son in New York that it's snowing, so I know it's coming our way. Thanks again for inviting us. We hope everyone has a great evening. Take care. And we will send this out as a replay. Bye-bye.